Good morning.
Good morning, Michael. Happy New
How are we?
Year.
Happy New Year.
If you can't tell by my hat on right now, Michael, I'm a little cold here in Cincinnati. I think it's probably a little cold there in Louisville too, but I decided to embrace winter today and wear my hat.
It's 12 degrees now in Louisville.
Look at you. Well, let's see.
Yeah,
Now you're gonna make me see this same thing here in Cincinnati.
12
Can't you
degrees.
tell? 12 degrees, but
Oh, you got to
14.
14.
We
Yeah,
got 14, but it feels like 3.
yeah.
Um, so I just decided to embrace it today and wear my hat for the show. So, wow, can you believe it's been almost a month for me because the last show, which was with Hannah, which we have back today, I wasn't able to be at.
Hmm.
So really, really, really excited to have Hannah here with us for our part four of our the series with Hannah today. But before we get there, just want to next week. This is really exciting. We have Paulo Corey, Director of CX Design, Client Journey Owner at Sun Life, going to be joining us. And Paulo used to be team members of ours, Michael, here at Mofi, but he'll be joining us for the show next week. And we're really excited that we have next week on January 10th our new season 6 of the Combustion Chronicles kicking off with influencers and Mavericks. And our very first one for next for season 6 is with an amazing influencer, Anthony James. Influencing B2B influencers is what we're going to be talking about on that episode. And it was so exciting with him. And as well, we have kicked off Mofi Academy and we have Navigating Conflict for Good. It's a virtual session that Michael will be leading. Michael, do you want to share a little bit about that with the audience and let them
Yeah,
know what's
yeah.
happening there?
It's such an important topic. I don't go more than a couple of days without hearing a story about somebody working somewhere who has just, especially with a great resignation. And we can talk with Hannah about this too, that conflict in the workplace causes people to either want to quit their job or to quit their job. So instead of just, being okay with that, why not dig into some conflict navigation training? And our training experience is different than anything else you'll go to, likely, because most conflict courses talk about conflict styles, and you just kind of decide which style works best for you. This actually uses a validated instrument called the conflict dynamic profile, where we dig into behaviors that happen in the conflict journey, and then what we do to navigate using what we know about our conflict behaviors and the behaviors of others. And so it's really a very different approach to conflict management, and it's really priced to go really cheap compared to most other courses out there. So we're doing it as a mission, if nothing else, to help people navigate conflict.
I love it. I love it, Michael. And those of you that have never heard Michael facilitate or be in the session with him, Michael is awesome. Love sitting in the sessions with him. So really excited about that and love it, love it, love it. And again, I am so excited to have Hannah back. I'm kind of sad. Like this is the 4th part of her book that we're getting into. But again, Hannah is a Gen Z expert. Through an unexpected introduction to the business world that involved her dad, a blue pickup truck, and an investment property, Hannah jumped into entrepreneurship and has never looked back. Now, as a 23-year-old Gen Zer, she has consulted businesses from startups to Fortune 500 companies and is on a mission to help leaders leverage Gen Z talent as a competitive advantage and build radical empathy. I love that. We love empathy in the workplace. She's also the author of the new book, A Leader's Guide to Unlocking Gen Z Insider Strategies to Empower Your Team. So let's welcome to the stage with us, Hannah. Hey, Hannah.
Hey, you guys. You can see my fancy schmancy new background.
I
It's
see your
impressive.
new background. And What I hope that our listeners and you all don't hear today is I have construction going on in our house, so everything looks really well put together. But if you saw everything around me, it's a disaster. And by next week's show, I'll have different colors back here. So,
Oh,
but I
that's
love your
exciting.
new back. I know I love your new background, Hannah.
This is
So
the depiction of the merging of the native analog generations and what made, that culture so special. So we've got Marilyn Monroe, we have a bunch of my favorite 50s outfits, and then up in the middle section, I can't even point with this mirroring, is everything that, or some things that define my generation. So you got the beauty all back here.
we love it. We love it. So thank you again, and we've got some great people listening in with us again today. Will, thanks for being here. Super interested in this topic, and this is part 4. So far, Hannah, we've talked about the first 3 sections of your book: attracting, recruiting, and then you talked with Michael about retaining Gen Z. And today we finally get to tackle the final section of the book, which focuses on engaging. So to get us started here, Hannah, can you tell us what's the difference between retaining and engaging in your mind and in your mindset of what you're teaching?
Yeah. So retaining is checking the box, right? You have a warm body in a seat. You've got an employee. Maybe they're doing the job well, maybe they're not, right? Some of these, some folks, we talk about retention all the time in terms of maybe you have someone who's been at your company for 10 or 15 years, but they put in 50% effort. Or they just kind of see it as a place to be. They've been there for a while. They do their work, but it's nothing more than that. When I talk about engagement, what I mean is a workforce that comes and brings 110% every day. They're truly engaged with what your company is doing and how that aligns with their personal mission statement for themselves and what they want out of life. And that is where, there's a huge difference in my head between retention, just the bare minimum, and engaging a workforce to be the best version of themselves and to have their own personal why and to understand, why they're at the company and why the work they do every day matters.
So you said something, and I know Michael was probably going to jump on this too, because we both shook our heads. You talked about the difference of retaining and engaging being checking the box
Mm-hmm.
versus really having a purpose to it, right? And it's
Exactly.
amazing. I actually just talked to a senior leader this morning about they're dealing with an issue within their organization. And this leader said to me, Shawn, I feel like all we're doing is checking the box in this area that they're dealing with around experience. And we're not really driving in. And we hear Disney, those of you that know I'm from Disney, see a lot of Disney behind me, around task versus purpose, right? And checking the box is task. What we're talking about, I think, in engaging is in purpose. And so I want to jump into this. I know Michael's got a couple questions around this, but you gave us a quote in your book that's really powerful that says, part of leading Generation Z is letting us lead you. Michael, take it away, and let's dig into this.
And yes, and I'm especially interested to hear the difference between a millennial approach to this and a Gen Z, because there's both nuances and there's major differences, right? But in terms of letting us lead you, that was kind of a banner cry of millennials, right? Of wanting to have power in an even footing in the workplace. And so I think I'm interested to hear from you how we take that up either a notch or tweak it to really focus on the Gen Z folks of what does it mean to let y'all lead us?
Yeah. Yeah. So, Michael, I made this really audacious, kind of controversial, not kind of, it's a very controversial statement recently, which is, and this is actually the premise for the podcast that I'm launching next week. It's this idea that I make this claim that if you do not have a native digital on your leadership teams or your project teams, your board of directors, or at least one that you pay or have in your ear pestering you, then your business isn't going to survive in the long term. And this goes hand in hand with a statement in my book, which is about, the best way to engage Gen Z is to let us be a part of leading you. And it's this concept of reverse mentorship, which I don't know if we've talked about it on this show before, but it's this idea that Gen Zers have access, just as some of the the younger millennials did, to a wide variety of educational tools from the moment we're born nowadays, right? I mean, formal education for Gen Z didn't start at, age 6 when they went to kindergarten. It starts from the moment they've got an iPad teaching them how to read and how to recognize letters and how to play games. That part of that education is embedded into us. And so we are actually coming into the workforce with a skill set that, in fact, I was reading an article recently that was talking about, the title of the article was, Gen Z is finally at work and millennials are freaked out. And the reason they're freaked out is because Gen Z is coming in with this level of experience and insight at 22 years old that you've never seen before from a generation. They're coming in with a heightened sense of a skill set in many areas, and also an incredible dearth of a skill set in another area, and a high level of anxiety and emotional trauma. So all those factors combined mean it's very difficult for someone from the native analog generation, for example, or even older millennials, or elder millennials, as one person put it to me recently. It's very difficult to understand what that mindset looks like. So you have to let Gen Z influence or lead you in many extents if you're trying to manage us or to have a company that speaks to what we want out of work.
So give us a specific example. So if I'm somebody of any age listening to this conversation right now, and my first response is, hell no, that's not how it works. I'm not going to put my business, risk my business with a 22-year-old who just thinks they know what they're doing. What is the response to that of like, no, that's not how it works? What's a specific example of letting a 22-year-old Gen Zer influence you in your business decisions that works out for success?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I have two answers. So there's two angles. All right. So first of all, I had the opportunity to interview Mark Miller, who's the VP of High Performance Leadership at Chick-fil-A, for my book project. And he and I collaborated on a wonderful chapter that talks about how, Chick-fil-A, who most of us know as an incredible employer of Gen Z, one of the things that he has integrated into their culture is this idea of reverse mentorship. And so it's in chapter 25, he and I lay out a framework for how this idea of reverse mentorship works, right? So he walks through several steps, and it goes from everything about being open to new ideas to being selective with who you mentor or who mentors you, all the way around to, honesty, attentiveness, and consistency. The point here being, reverse mentorship doesn't mean put Gen Z on a pedestal and have them tell you what to do. What it means is having day-to-day intentional conversations with someone younger than you. Maybe you're managing them, or maybe it's a skip level meeting where maybe you're the director or the vice president of a department and you choose to meet with your new coordinator in the department and just get their fresh perspective and insights. And honestly, this is nothing new. I mean, we've been talking about engagement for forever, right? I mean, this is how you engage a workforce of any generation, is to let them have a voice and hear their fresh perspective, particularly when they first come to your company, because that's when they're not, dripping in all the cultural juices that you've let them simmer in for 5 years or whatever. But the distinction here with native digitals is most companies before they'll take insight from a 22-year-old or even an intern, say a 20-year-old, they at least require they, steep for a couple years or at least have experience somewhere else. What I'm proposing is that the best way to engage Gen Z is to show that 22-year-old that right off the bat, they have insights that no one else is going to see in the company. And I'll give you a specific example. One of my clients is a healthcare company up north, and I was leading a workshop with them recently. It had a variety of people in the room, from Gen Zers to millennials. There were some Gen Xers. And one of the Gen Zers, kind of timidly at first, because even though their culture is incredibly supportive of Gen Zers as a whole, you still could sense some timidity from the Gen Zers of really saying what they wanted to say about the culture they were experiencing. Well, finally, through my guidance and prodding and trying to create an environment where they could be honest, one of the Gen Zers piped up and she said, "So I just got promoted to a manager position. I've been here for 6 months, and the team members around me have started talking about how their friends who they're trying to refer to the company keep denying employment with us because of the way our vacation and benefits policies are structured." And the CEO was in the room, and he, looked at this Gen Zer and gave her this glance. And I urged him, when we had a break, I urged him to respond. If instead of saying, "Okay, thanks for the idea," and leaving it at that, I asked him to ask the question of the Gen Zer, say first, "Thank you for your opinions and insight. What would you do?" And out of that question, this Gen Zer, who is 20, she hadn't gone to school, she was 20 years old, she opened up I watched her build this entire plan for the CEO right in the room of exactly why her friends would choose to work at the company if they could make some small tweaks. And by the end of the session, the CEO had adopted her plan. They rolled it out, and they retained 2 staff members the next week because of the Gen Zers plan. So this is just the power of, you see 2 things happening. One is you have to have a Gen Zer who's comfortable enough in your culture to actually give an opinion. And then secondly, have a leader who's willing to listen and to take it into consideration. And if it's a good plan, recognize where he may have had a blind spot. And both those things happen. And this company is so much better off because of that one change.
That's fantastic. While we're on this topic, though, what would your advice be if it's not the best of ideas or something that needs to be tabled? What's the language or tone to say thank you? Because if you say, we'll talk about it later, well, we know what that means. How do you not screw up the energy in the room, but also say, "Oh, I don't know."
So in this particular example, we were in a brainstorming and ideation session anyway. So multiple team members were having the opportunity to go stick their ideas on the whiteboard. And then we were going to select, the best ideas that we wanted to move forward and eliminate the ones that we didn't think as a team had the biggest impact. So in this particular situation, the way we handled this, or the way I facilitated this workshop, was to have every idea listed on the board and then have the team collectively, cross out the ones they decided not to pursue at that moment and circle the ones that were most impactful. So what happened in this case is there were several bad ideas that did come up during the conversation. And I could sense the CEO's hesitancy of like, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to open that can of worms." But I encouraged him to go ahead and let the idea be put on the board, because sometimes acknowledgement is the only thing that that person needs to feel engaged, right? Even if their idea is not selected, acknowledging that they had a voice for a moment and that it was considered and that they had a voice in determining that their colleague's idea was the better one to pursue. Sometimes that's all that's needed for engagement.
And, in the brainstorming world, you need to be able to have bad ideas,
Exactly.
right? That's part of the process. So beyond mentorship, what else would be keys to the kingdom for you for engagement?
Oh gosh, there are so many things. So, even just looking at my book, and if anyone has not read this, I know you guys have at least gone through each of the individual chapters, but there are several chapters at the end that just talk about some specific things very important to Gen Z. So, one of those is supporting our mental health. And this is a massive topic. Of course, again, this is not unique to Gen Z, but if you look at the statistics of this generation, at least we're self-reporting to be one of the most anxious, depressed generations that has existed, at least that's alive currently. Now, in my head, I know, many other generations just simply aren't talking about it, right? Or they're
That's
just
right.
beginning to feel comfortable with it.
Or didn't have language around it. You felt that
Exactly.
way, but you didn't understand that there was a word to put with it, that all of a sudden there's a word now, and we're like, oh, that's what that was. Good to know.
Exactly.
Thank you. Had no idea. Thank you, though.
100%. But Gen Z, native digitals are a generation that now, because we do have a name for it, and of course, the other factors we've talked about on previous sessions of the lifestyle we had growing up and the exposure to bullying earlier on social media, just all of these things have led to a generation who creates this expectation out of work that the place of work where we spend most of our time and our leaders support our mental health. And in that article I mentioned earlier, the one where the millennials were freaked out by Gen Z, this was one of the things that they notated. And I think if I can recall the specific example, it was, the millennial boss was freaked out that her Gen Z staff wanted a day off for mental health, or
I
a
love
day
that.
off for, period cramps or whatever it was. And so this is kind of freaking people out. And I totally get that. Like, obviously, there's some companies setting better expectations than others. That being said, it is quite crucial for Gen Z that part of engaging us is letting us know that you support our entire well-being in a very personalized and customized way. So if you look at just the statistics around mental health, there was the Harris poll did a study, I believe it was last year, and they were asking Gen Zers what their primary stressors were, and for 8 out of 10, so this is just 18 to 21-year-olds, they said that money is a significant source of stress. And you can think these were this was the generation, or at least the college age students who were graduating during COVID and couldn't get grocery stocking jobs with a bachelor's degree. Nearly 2 in 3 Gen Zers who were a little younger, so 15 to 17, said that their families not having enough money was also a significant stressor. And if you can believe this, a third of Gen Z was saying that like housing instability or their inability to invest or having personal debt was a significant source of stress. So if I'm an employer of Gen Z and I want to show Gen Z they matter and help, to engage them with the culture of, the type of thing that Gen Z wants out of work, I would be putting a heavy focus on trying to support the financial aspects of a lifestyle that Gen Z wants to have. So this is not just, sometimes it's higher salary. If you look at the statistics that compare Gen Z to millennials, Gen Z puts a much higher priority on financial or monetary related things versus benefits. Millennials put a whole lot more heavy emphasis on benefits and work-life balance. Gen Z is like, no, just take my paycheck up. Like, I'll decide how to use my money. But if you can support, those stressors or the mental health components, I know organizations that are paying for therapy subscriptions for their Gen Zers, things like this that really show that the company cares about, again, the well-rounded health of their employees and not just the bottom line.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love the roundedness of it, that it's not just let's focus all this on just mental health. It's really about saying, mental health is an important piece of the bigger picture.
Yep.
So important.
Well, and I love how you just made the correlation, Hannah, to millennials to Gen Z. It's not much different than what it was for Gen X to Gen Y,
Mhm.
around the benefits to the money, show us the money versus I see this. And what's interesting to me is that corporations, companies have still not caught on to this. It's a cyclical cycle that we keep going through, and we still keep doing the same thing over and over again.
My
Well,
my one quick pushback is
yes,
I get the whole concept of reverse mentorship. That I'm not going to be using that term because for me, mentorship is mentorship. And if we reframe mentorship as anyone who helps us, I actually have had already committed to having a younger mentor versus an older mentor for this year. So I didn't approach him to say, "Hey, let's reverse this." I just said, "You're a mentor.
I
Own it."
love that
Yeah,
so much. Yes, let's
yeah,
change what mentorship means. That
exactly.
would help the entire world because it shouldn't just be guy reaches the top of the mountain and hands down a rope. It should be we're on equal playing fields, equally have something to offer, and we're both going to offer perspectives and insights the other wouldn't have thought of.
Although
yeah,
everybody over the age of 40 just like had a heart palpitation, but yes.
yeah.
Yes.
We just totally rocked the whole, every HR department's going like,
We're
oh
not
my
equal.
gosh,
We're not
they're
equal.
being
We're
this
not
different.
equal.
You're like, yes. Well, and I think that goes back to Michael, our whole concept in Kiss Your Dragons around radical
Mhm.
relationships.
Exactly.
That titles,
Exactly.
people, I want to surround myself with people that are going to make me smarter. And I don't care what age you are. I don't care, what gender you are. I don't care. That's not what it is. I want to surround myself. I look at you, Hannah, as a mentor.
Oh,
You have
thank
taught
you for
us
that.
you have taught us so much about this, and no other guest have we brought on 4 times, so I hope that says to people, we look at you, we look at you as a mentor in our lives, and what you've poured into us has been so valuable. And I know with other guests the same exact thing. So last question for you, Hannah, before we wrap up today. What trends do we need to be paying attention to for 2023 and beyond when it comes to Gen Z?
I would say let's wrap it up by going back to my first statement. If you don't have a native digital on your board of directors, and this can be your personal board of directors, it can be the mentors you surround yourself with, your leadership team or project teams, or one who you pay or talk to or come to webinars like this to pester you like a fly in your ear, your business is a dead man walking. And I would say that if you're paying attention to trends for Gen Z for this year, for next year, be thinking about what is to come, not what is the present. Nobody could anticipate the pandemic having happened a couple of years ago. I urge you to think what if something equally as disruptive, which is the native digital generation who is literally changing every way we work, play, and think. What happens if they're my only consumer in 5 years? Even though that won't be the case, think that way. Think, what if they were my only consumer in 5 years? What would I do differently about my business, how I recruit, how I look at my consumers, how I try to retain my staff? Think with that positioning, and you're going to be able to create new business categories and remain a competitor in your field instead of losing out like all these dying analog businesses like Pier 1 and Kohl's and Barnes and Noble and all these that are just declining because they haven't recognized the shift that the native digital is bringing.
I love it. I love it. Well, Hannah, thank you so much again. It's always just a pleasure to talk with you and to be mentored by what you're teaching us. So hang out with us, and we will be back to say bye to you after we close out the show. So just hang
Sounds
around
good.
for us, Hannah. Awesome. Well, again, Michael, love it. It was awesome. Hannah just brings amazing insights. So excited about that. Um, again, want to talk about next week. Paulo, a former friend, colleague of ours, director of CX design and client journey, owner at Sun Life, will be with us. Can't wait to hear that. And as well, next week is the kickoff for season 6, influencing B2B influencers with Anthony J. James. If you don't follow Anthony on LinkedIn, go out, follow him as well. 3 million plus followers and just has an amazing insight. Go out, make sure you follow Hannah as well on LinkedIn. I follow her all the time. Go out to her website. So good to have her here. And Michael, have a great weekend.
You too. Stay warm.
All right. We'll talk to you later.